What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so I had got a request to talk about this tragedy that occurred in Texas. And I think the town is called, I believe it's Frisco, Texas, where a young man, 17-year-old Austin Metcalf, lost his life. I think it was April the 2nd. And an altercation occurred between him and another student, 17-year-old Karmelo Anthony. Of course, not the basketball player. Now, this incident, which resulted in a stabbing of Austin Metcalf, which ultimately led to his unaliving, occurred at the Frisco Independent School District's Coy Kendall Stadium, I think that's how it's pronounced, at a track event, I think it was. And the media, some of the media, seems to leave out the fact that Anthony was also an athlete competing at this event. They make it seem like some of the media that he was like a trespasser, just there causing harm, when in reality he was there. And an incident occurred between these two. Apparently, Metcalf put his hands on Anthony, and Anthony retaliated by stabbing him in the chest. I think unbeknownst to Anthony, Anthony stabbed him in the heart, which obviously is a fatal wound. And according to the media, Metcalf passed away in his brother's arms. Now, Metcalf claims self-defense. When police arrived, from what I have read, he had his hands in the air. He confessed to being the person that stabbed Metcalf. He showed concern for Metcalf's well-being. He asked whether or not Metcalf was all right. And he also stated that he asked the police officer whether what he did could be considered self-defense. Now, these are my thoughts on this, right? Because I did like a little bit of research. From the way that the media is portraying this, first of all, it's obvious that they're using a racial angle. When you look at photos of Rivers, it's usually him in a uniform or with family. And with Anthony, it's the mugshot, which obviously puts you into the mind frame that he is a criminal. I'm just saying, I just noticed that the media does this often. Metcalf was a student at Memorial High School, which was nearby, and Anthony was a student at Centennial High School, I guess in the Frisco, Texas area. And they both were 17 years old. I also saw that Anthony, so far, who has a $1 million bond, there has been money raised in Anthony's defense, or at least for funding for his defense. It's now total over $250,000, $250,000. So look, when I look at the evidence that's out there from the media, what Anthony did seems excessive. Like, damn, what happened to people fighting each other? You know what I'm saying? What's going on with the culture, making it seem like the people always have to, resort to using some type of weapon, right? But there are other things that are out there that a lot of media is leaving out. And what a lot of the media is leaving out is that Metcalf and his brother, his twin brother, appeared to be bullies, okay? They appear to have been, at least from what I've read, They appear to be bullies, people who try to, or kids that, those kids that in high school try to be the alphas, try to bully other kids and bully other students. And I get the impression from what I've read, did a little bit of research, that they tried to bully him, Anthony, and they ran into the wrong one. Okay? Not trying to condone this unaliving at all, but it seems like this was a real life FAFO situation. Okay? That stands for something. If you don't know what, you can look it up and see what that stands for. Like I said, it's a tragedy all around, but I don't like how a lot of conservative media outlets are already jumping the gun and making this about, the usual suspects who always claim that the left use race or are obsessed with race, right? But they use race in every time, every situation. They're obsessed with it, but they project and say that the left is always, obsessed with race. Because I have a feeling that if the stabbing victim in this situation, if both of them were white, the media wouldn't care as much. If both of them were black, people would just dismiss it as, you just can't help these people, they're violent. You know what I'm saying? If the stabbing victim had been black and the person who had stabbed the other, if the stabber was white and the stabbee were black, I got a feeling that these same social media and media conservatives would somehow be justifying him acting in self-defense. You know what I'm saying? Sort of like how Kyle Rittenhouse crossed state lines to unalive protesters, right? You could argue he was looking for trouble, but people justified by saying they got violent with him or something like that. I can't remember all the details, but they justified by saying, look, man, they approached him. Well, can we use the same logic here? No, your mind won't let you do that. Another thing that I was thinking about too with this situation is it's interesting how a lot of conservatives out there talk about how George Floyd and his actions and his lifestyle is almost like he had it coming with the situation that ended his life, right? Whether you want to believe this story about the counterfeit $20 bill or whatever, they go out their way to say, look, his actions led to what happened to him, right? Now, I don't know whether or not everything that I'm reading about these two twins is true, but I find it interesting that the father, who was on Fox News a couple of days ago, seems very adamant about not having this thing devolve into a racial situation or to a race issue. And I wonder why that's the case. Is there some things that the media are not talking about? Because when you do a little, at least what I've read, and at least what I heard, Frisco only has an 8% black population versus essentially a 92% white population when you include other non-black races. So that tells me something too about this situation. And, look, some people are saying, well, what is a kid doing with a knife? Now, granted, he shouldn't have had that knife at that event, and that's going to hurt him. And when you look at the culture and you look at the location and geography of where this trial is going to be held, it's not looking good for Karmelo Anthony. He's going to do some time. He's going to do some serious time. I don't see any way around it. There's just certain racial realities in this country that can't be avoided. Okay? But having said that, for those of you who keep saying, well, why did he have a weapon on him or whatever, even though it was, I think, stupid of him to have that weapon there because it led to what, happened, at the same time, we're talking about Texas. I mean, it is something in the Southern culture where people often will have weapons on them for self-preservation reasons. Look, when I was as young as 18, now granted, this was pre 9/11. Okay, this was pre 9/11. This was a different world. But when I was 18, 19, I used to carry a knife around with me. It wasn't because I was trying to get into trouble, but I carried a knife around me because when I was, 17 or 18, I was almost a victim of a robbery. So that situation right there told me, okay, now I know you're not really supposed to bring a knife to a gunfight, but still, I want to have some type of chance in case something like this happens to me. And you gotta realize that this kid probably comes from or lives in an environment where you have to protect yourself. That's getting lost in the situation because most of the people who are looking at this situation see these people from only the surface, i.e. skin color. But yeah, like at the end of the day, this is a tragic situation. Essentially, two people's lives have been shattered. One life or two families have been shattered. One kid lost his life needlessly. Another kid is probably going to ruin his life. Another thing I see too that people aren't looking into is that when I looked into Karmelo Anthony's scholastic profile, this is a 4.0 student. This is not a dummy here. This isn't a kid that the media, the liberal, racist media, is trying to mold into the stereotypical black thug image. That's why I've always said, that's why I have so much disdain for Democrats. It's because I know a Republican, I know what they're about. It's the Democrats that pretend to be our friends, and they're not. They're not. So like how Malcolm X said, he akin conservatives to wolves. We know to be wary of the wolf. But the liberal is like the fox with the sly grin. The fox fiends to be a friendlier animal, a friendlier opponent, if you want to call it that, or a friendlier ally. But in reality, the fox is sly and the fox have ulterior motives. That's a danger. That's a danger to us. And that's why I've always looked upon the Democrats with even more scorn than I do the Republicans, especially post-civil rights, because all of the people who were involved, and I hate to make it all about this, but because people don't seem like they want to hear what I'm saying, I still get idiots that comment saying, why don't you explain what your boy Trump, I didn't vote for Trump. But if you're in your feelings still because I thought Kamala Harris was an idiot, well, she reveals herself to be an idiot. Do you hear her talk? You know what I'm saying? It'd still be the same problems going on if she got into the White House. But anyway, that's pretty much all I got to say for this situation, man. It's an absolute tragedy. And I think that the media needs to do their job and present these cases more fairly and stop using subtle and sometimes not so subtle, racial overtones or present racial overtones to these situations. Because that's the only reason why this case has any real traction. You know what I'm saying? That's the only reason why. And it's disgusting. But anyway, that's all I got to say about it.